Programming the Motorola GM350. Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. So we've got here my Motorola GM350, and in a previous video I assembled a programming interface to be able to program it using a very modern computer, because the programming software is absolutely ancient, and I had to do a couple of other things as well to get that to work. So I'm going to go through the programming. So there's three flavours of this radio that I know of. There's the low band VHF version, which is this one, which is suitable for the 4-metre amateur radio band. There's, I think it's either called mid or high band VHF, I can never remember. But it's suitable for the 2-metre band. I've been actually looking at those, as I'm thinking of getting one. And there's a UHF version, which is suitable for the 70cm band, and I'm going to assume PMR 446 as well, so it looks like it covers that range, which is actually good for those in America, where the PMR 446 frequencies are actually allocated to the 70cm band. And I do have coffee. Now, the reason why I'm at home is because I've been waiting for a call from my GP, and there's a small cut on my finger, and I had to make sure that I was alright for tetanus and didn't need a tetanus injection. I don't appear to, which is good. Especially good because technical people like me are cutting themselves all the time anyway, and also there's the risk I'll cut myself while I'm out doing my job, but it was actually when I was doing my job when I cut myself on a gate bolt, and it was quite painful. It still is, actually. So we're back to the subject matter, which is programming this, and for this example we're going to use my main desktop computer. The only Windows that's on it is in a virtual machine, which I will show you. So data interface plugs into there. There is apparently a way to do it from the interface ports on the back of these, but I've not seen any documentation to that effect, so we'll do it from the front, which is what we've got. So I've got my little interface, and I will go and retrieve that. Okay, so we've got plugged into the computer this USB cable. This is a USB type A to, when I find what I'm looking for, there we go, to a mini USB connector like that. You can still get those cables. This one came with my Yaesu FT2D for flashing firmware to it. And without me walloping the camera, we've got the USB to TTL interface. You can see how that's wired up there. There's a little diode in there on the transmit side. And then the orange wire goes straight to the receive side, and the blue and white is going to the ground side. And as you can see at the top, we have our mini USB connector, not micro. So we're going to plug that into there. I'm going to have to do this one-handed because I've only got one hand, because one hand's holding the camera. And I think it goes that way, actually. Let's try that. And oh, I can't plug it in. That's why it was the right way, I just couldn't get it in at first. There we go. So now your interface board lights up. On this one, it's got a little red light to indicate that it's doing that it's powered up, and it's got two little LEDs down there to indicate transmit and receive, which it's not doing at the moment. So the next thing we need to do, we need to plug it into the radio. Now this radio has no power to it yet. I am going to arrange that. So if I plug that into the radio, that is now plugged in to the radio. We'll bring that up onto the desk, so it's somewhat the mixing desk, that is, so it's somewhat visible, so you can see it there. So that's the interface there, and that's the USB cable going back off to the computer. There's a hot melt glue stick on my mixing desk, I don't know why. And that's the radio there. We're not powered up yet, I need to get some power for it. So I will arrange the power. I'll also move my phone out of the way, because I don't really want that in shot, because my phone isn't important here. What's important is this Motorola GM350, and many of you will recognise that as a taxi radio. There's two different variants of the GM350 series. There's this type which has got the 4 presets, and there's one with a display which I believe has 128. The display ones I'm actually interested in because of that feature for the 2 meter band. So I can have pretty much all the simplex channels and a couple of repeaters programmed into it. So it'd make a good backup radio for, say, if my FTM 400 decides it doesn't want to work. Which shouldn't happen, because that's a good radio as well. So I will now go and arrange some power for this. Okay, so the radio is now connected to power. I've got it connected to my LifePo 4 battery. I've had to use my Anderson power pole to ring terminal connector in reverse to what I would normally use it, and I've had to insulate one of the connectors on that to make sure that it doesn't short out. That's the positive side that I've insulated. The negative side I've not done, so that's not likely to short out on anything, because pretty much everything else is probably ground. So it's not really that much of an issue. So we'll turn the power to the radio on. Makes a loud beep when you start it up. And if everything's wired correctly in this, it shouldn't try and go into transmit or anything. So that is a good sign. So the next bit we need to do is go to the computer. And we'll go from there, and I'll show you the programming software. Okay, so now we've got everything connected up and the power's on. Here's what we need to do. First things first. We'll go into the terminal, which is that one there, and we'll do this, which is ls/tv, or dev if you want to call it that. So we're looking in here for TTY USB 0, and we have it right there. Let's highlight that for you. There we go. So dev TTY USB 0, so we're fine there. We know the device is being recognised by the computer. There's nothing else I need to change there. So the next thing we need to do is we need to launch VirtualBox, which is down here. There we go. And we're going to check the settings of that. And serial ports. So enable serial port, ensure that's ticked. That'll put it as COM1 to the virtual machine. Host device is the mode that we want, because that way it will communicate with the little device just off the screen there. And the device name, which is dev TTY USB 0. Let's give warning invalid settings somewhere for the display, I think it is. So we're going to start up that virtual machine. And then that will start into MS-DOS. Go through all the usual MS-DOS era stuff. Now this isn't set up to start Windows automatically, so if you remember from back in the day, I'm not sure how many of you do, you type in Win, that would start Windows, and there's Windows for you. So the next thing we need to do is load the RSS. So it's going to tell me I've clicked inside there. So that's the RSS. This version of the RSS does have a quirk in it where it crashes if you've got CTCSS or PL, as Motorola call it, set on any of the channels. I don't know why that is. It's just that way. So we read from the radio with this button here. Successfully complete. We get rid of that. So what we can do is we can go into, if you want to look at the radio settings, we'll go into per radio. So we've got the 2 buttons on the front of the radio. This might have more information in it for the units with the display. But on this one, because it's just the two big buttons and then the 4 presets, all we've got here is monitor, which is the speaker symbol button, and the second button's actually disabled, but we're going to keep it disabled because we don't need it here. So the transmit settings can be set from 5 to 25 watts. There's a timeout timer set, that's 190 seconds. I'm not sure if that's really long enough, but I can disable that if I so choose. So there's a forced monitor mode set to always. Not sure we need that set, but that's fine. I'm not going to change it. And it's all set variable volume there, which means you can turn the sound up and down, I'm guessing. That's probably what this is all about. So the external alarm is disabled, we don't need that. Engaged alert, which I think's if you have I think it's a transmit inhibit if the radio is already receiving something, which in this case it wouldn't need to actually worry about that because we know when to wait to speak anyway. So it'll start up on a designated channel, which in this case is at the moment channel 1. Off hook function disabled, we don't need that. And we've got all the alerts set to variable volume, so those will change if you turn the sound up and down using the volume control. So we don't need to change anything in here really. So if we go to per channel, that'll give us the settings for the channels. So on here you've got this display alias. You can't change that on this radio because it's the 4-channel radio without the display. It allows channel selection. It's got pre-emphasis and de-emphasis switched on. Talk around allowed, but we don't need the talk around because there's no repeaters programmed into this and there's none on the 4-meter band anyway. So we've got transmit options, including the timeout timer and such things like forced monitor, which we don't need. And single tone encode on the PTT key, we don't need that. Receive squelch is set to carrier, which it usually is. So I think the other option is PL, which we don't need. So as long as those are disabled, it won't crash the software. So transmit and receive frequency, as long as they match up, they're fine. Because it's simplex use. So you've got your 2nd channel, 3rd channel, 4th channel, pretty much the same thing. Set the frequency you want in the boxes. Then obviously you would press OK. That's gone back to that screen now. So if we go to the GPIO lines, which is useful if you want to connect one of these up to, say, maybe it uses an iGate or something, you can get PTT enabled off the pins on the back. So yeah, PTT on pin 3 it says here. That would be useful, yeah, like I say, for iGates or other types of gateway. I think some people use these as all-star nodes off the top of my head. But correct me if I'm wrong. So you can change all of those. You don't necessarily need to set those unless you've got a specific reason to set them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back into per channel and we're going to change channel 2. But I'm going to put it back to how it was afterwards. So if I change channel 2, I found it on 475 on one side and 425 on the other. I'm going to set it to 475 on both sides. Okay, 475. And let's get into the keyboard because the camera looking at the radio is in the way. So 475. So I've now set those. So I'm going to press OK. I'm going to cancel that so I don't need it. I'm going to close that one off because I don't need it. And we're going to write to the radio, which is this button here. Radio will beep once done. Successfully complete comes up on the screen. And that's the radio now programmed. And that's it running perfectly acceptably in the program software running perfectly acceptably in Windows 3.1. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to find a dummy load to plug into that and find another radio that I can just run just to test to see if that transmit has actually worked. So I shall be back in a moment. So if you remember from earlier, which wasn't actually that long ago, we made a change to channel number 2. So if I go to per channel again and we look at channel number 2, that should be set to 7475. So I have a handheld here. Got a lot of noise on that frequency. Not sure if you can see the handheld. I'll try and bring it in. There it is. If you can see it, I don't know, because I can't actually see the camera screen at the moment. Yeah, it's kind of there. Yes, that's the handheld. That's on 7475. So what we're going to do is I'm going to close off this window. And obviously close off the virtual machine because we no longer need it. So that will exit the RSS. Yes. This will end your Windows session. Okay. So I now need to go back into this so I can just power this down, which will be that button, and then we're okay. So that's now the VM now closed, now no longer operating. So I'm going to unplug the programming cable. That is now unplugged. And I'm now going to transmit on the handheld and see if we get anything. Okay, we're on the wrong frequencies. Try that again. I'm going to turn that up so you can hear it.
Mike 0 Whiskey November Uniform Test.
Too loud because there was some feedback going on there. So we've programmed the receive to 475. So I'm just going to put the handheld down over there while it's making a racket. We're going to plug in the microphone without me walloping another microphone, which is the one that I'm using to record the voice. So if I plug that into there, I'm not sure you really meant to do this with the radio still on, but that's what I'm doing. So turn up the handheld. Mike 0 Whiskey November Uniform Testing. Mike 0 Whiskey November Uniform Testing. Mike 0 Whiskey November Uniform Testing. It is working, it is transmitting, but there's some interference there, which is somewhat disturbing. So that's the radio reprogrammed for a different frequency. So now I'm going to reverse it back to how it's labelled on the GM350 itself. So I'm going to unplug the microphone, if I can get it to unplug. It's got this rubber boot over it and it's very difficult to unplug. There we go. And I'll plug the programmer back in and we'll start Windows again. Well, Windows 3.1. So start the virtual machine again. So that's going to do the usual MS-DOS stuff. And then when that's done, we'll type in the command to start Windows. I mean, I could set this up to automatically start Windows like it was back in the day. So there we go. So now we've got the program manager with the GM350 RSS. So it's just telling me I've got to do that. So that's now the radio reconnected to the programmer, and we're going to read from the radio again. Successfully complete. Then we're going to go into edit. We don't want to do that. So we want to go to edit per, well, not necessarily per radio, but we could go in there. Per channel. We want to set channel 2 back up to 7425. And it tells you the minimum and maximum down here. I didn't notice that before. So 66 to 88, which is the frequency range of this radio. 7425. And I'm not going to make the same mistake the original person that programmed this did. I'll make sure both frequencies are exactly the same. So 7425, 7425. Okay. We'll cancel that so we don't need it. So edit. We don't need to change anything else in here. So I'm going to now write to the radio, which is this one. Radio is now rebooted. And then we're going to test again to make sure I put it right. So I'll unplug that again. And we'll plug the microphone back in. And if I can get the microphone to plug back in, because remember I've got a cut finger, it's not ideal. Yeah, it's a bit of a problem when there's a rubber boot across the plug. That's designed to make it look tidy, and I think to deter people from actually unplugging the microphone, unless they're actually authorised to do so. So we've made the changes. Channel 2. When I key up on the handheld, we should hear nothing. I'll turn the handheld back on first. Okay, nothing. I change the handheld's frequency to the correct frequency. We should hear something.
Mike 0 Whiskey November Uniform Test.
So, that's on 7425. I don't know if you can actually see that, but I can assure you it is. Mike 0 Whiskey November Uniform Test. Yeah, I'm happy with that. So that's basically the programming of a Motorola GM350. Not sure if it's that instructional, so I'm going to close that off now, because we don't need it. And I'm going to close Windows back down, because I don't need it. I'm going to then have to press right control on my keyboard to release the mouse cursor from the virtual machine, so I can actually turn the virtual machine off. Back in the day with MS-DOS, you just had to shut down Windows, but once it was back at the DOS prompt, you just turned the computer off. Which I thought was a bit of a silly thing to do, but, you know. So that's now done. And that's now done. So that is now one programmed radio. So hopefully that will give you an idea of how to program one of these radios. I'm not going to give links to any of the software. I'm going to just leave that for you to find. Because I'm pretty sure there are still some copyrights on that software. And I don't want to be giving out links to software that you technically are supposed to pay for. So I'm going to close off that window that's actually open on the computer. That was the OBS window, which I was using to do most of the screen recording. Anyway, my battery's about to run flat on my camera, so I'm going to have to get this footage transferred across. So, you know who I am, Paul, and you know my call sign, Mike 0 Whiskey November Uniform. I'm hopefully going to try and get on 4 meters at some point, because I've got the radio. I just need to put the antenna back on the car. So I've got the antenna. I can actually see where it is. It's kind of slid down my sofa cushions and is kind of sticking out because I had it out to put a label on it so I could identify it. Anyway, so these radios, you can get them off eBay or even amateur radio rallies, like in the case of this one. I got that from the Blackpool rally, about 30 quid. I've only really ever had it on air properly once, but now it's programmed properly. I should be able to have it on air a bit more often. So I'm now going to get this video and put it on here. And you know where that is, don't you? That's YouTube. So, 7-3 for now.